Feed-On brings to you some interesting conversations with badass founders from the fields of business and tech. Today we have with us Mr. Harsh Lal, co-founder of Soul Store, which is a super popular online store selling quirky merchandise based on pop culture. Of course, we have Shantanu, my friend and co-host with us.
I'm wearing it.
Awesome.
Great. It's very excited to have you, Harsh. I'll just start off with a personal anecdote that I have been a Soul Store customer since 2014. I think it started in 2013 or 2014.
Yeah.
So 2014, first year of college, I have been a Soul Store customer since then. So very happy to see you grow the way you have.
Awesome.
And this could be a great starting point. If you could give us a peek into your journey to finding Soul Store, and you can start right from your childhood maybe and give us any influences that led to all of this.
Awesome. So I think the one thing that I'll tell most people listening, right, is that like most of those people, I didn't have a plan growing up. I didn't have a set path. This is what I want to do. I'll do this, then I'll do this, then I'll study this, then I get this job. I didn't have that. Growing up, I think I was always fascinated by a lot of different things, and I wasn't sure of that one specific thing that I wanted to do. So I took up science in the 11th and 12th because I was a good kid, got good grades throughout. After science, it opened up more options for me. So I'm like, cool, let's do science in the 11th and 12th, right? Once I passed on the 12th, again, I wasn't really sure on what I wanted to do. So I decided to take up law because it seemed interesting at the time. So I studied law for 5 years, did a bunch of legal internships as well. Again, hardworking student, got good grades. But towards the end of graduation, I realized this is not something I want to do for the rest of my life, right? I want to do something that's a little more fun, so a little more creatively challenging. So I actually took up a journalism internship in my last semester of law. Now, this is a point in time where most people are taking up their final internships, hoping to convert that to a pre-placement offer. And at this point in time, I am essentially risking all of it and applying to BBC for a journalism internship with zero journalism experience, right? Somehow I managed to land that role. Had an insane 2 months with BBC where I worked with their radio and their TV teams. I then graduated. Then I was like, okay, what do I do next, right? Journalism was fun, but it didn't seem like something I could probably do for the rest of my life. So I was like, cool, let's try advertising. Again, it's something that just seems fun. It seems interesting, seems glamorous from the outside. Definitely seems like a lot more fun than law did for me. So I took up an advertising internship for a couple of months. I was offered a full-time role out there. I actually got to work. I got to intern with copywriting, with social media, with marketing. It was a lot of fun. I then did client servicing for about 6 or 7 months, and I'm going to be very, very honest. It was not something I was too kicked about. I personally found social media and copywriting a lot more fun, and I think Shantanu would definitely back me up on that on copywriting.
Absolutely.
But I decided to give it a shot. Yeah, I decided to give it a shot for 6 or 7 months. It was actually a very, very interesting experience in hindsight because a lot of stuff that I learned back in the day at my advertising agency actually is something I use on a day-to-day basis at the Soul Store. After I got done with my stint at advertising, I told myself, it's been a year since you passed out of law college. Like fun time, experimentation time is done. What is one thing you really, really want to do, right? Something that you can actually change into a career. We keep talking about changing your passions to your career. And the first one that popped up in my mind was tattooing. Now, I have loved tattoos since I was a kid. I have 3 tattoos myself. You obviously can't see them because I've chosen them very, very smartly. So I decided to learn tattooing for 6 months, somehow convinced my parents to let me figure it out for 6 months. So I spent 6 months doing tattooing. Again, great fun. You get to meet lots of people, lots of customers. Your sales skills get tested, your negotiation skills get tested. It's a lot of hard work because there is obviously no room for errors, right? You have to be very, very thorough about everything from setting up to cleaning to managing the entire space. So lots of hard work. Did that for 6 months and then I realized, okay, you know what? I love getting tattoos, but I probably can't make a career of this. So I then went back to law for a year because that was the safest option. After doing law for a year, finally the Soul Store started, right? So at this point in time, I've had experience in journalism and advertisement, in tattooing. I've done a bunch of legal internships. It's a bunch of varied experience. But I think the one common thing that all 4 of us co-founders had when we started the Soul Store was all of us had jobs that we had done in the past that we were not too kicked about. None of us looked forward every Monday morning or every week, to a new start at office. And I think that's the one motivating factor that drove us, right? Let's start something where you actually enjoy waking up every single day. You actually enjoy doing what you're doing. And most importantly, we wanted to create an environment for everyone else who joins the Soul Store who actually enjoys doing what they're doing. Because, when you're in that frame of mind, when you
Absolutely.
have that mindset, you're always going to give your 200%. You're excited, you're looking forward to stuff that you're doing. And, if you treat it like school or college, where you're snoozing your alarms, your parents are pushing you out of bed saying, go to school and study. If you approach work with that mindset, right, you're never going to give 200%. And I think we've all had those experiences, where you've not really been very attentive in school. You've not really put too much effort because you'd rather sleep or watch TV. So I think, when you'd rather work and not do something else, that's when you found what you want to do in life.
Absolutely. And I can relate to this so much right now, having done, bunch of things myself in the last 5 years, and now doing something that I absolutely love to do and creating an
Awesome.
organization around it. We have this saying, and we discussed this, I think, in that Lady Shri Ram, when we were at Lady Shri Ram too, uh, about being passionately curious, right?
Yes.
How important that is. And I think your journey uh, exemplifies, and you are impersonification of trying out a lot of different things, figuring out
Definitely.
what you are super passionate about, and then seeing it through. And I
Awesome.
think you've done what, 5 to 6 internships, right, when you were in college?
Probably more. Yeah, I think in college itself, probably 5 or 6, maybe another 1 or 2 after that. Honestly, I've not worked on my CV in the last 7 or 8 years, so I don't have an exact number. But yeah, I think the one important thing I tell people, right, is when you're young, when you're in college, a lot of people are unsure on exactly what is happening. What do I do after I graduate? What kind of job should I take up? What will look good on my CV? What is the right move for my career? I think the one important thing for everyone, right, who goes through that is to realize that most people are in the same boat. There are very, very few people who know from day
Right.
one exactly what they want to do. When you're younger, I think my advice is definitely experiment more. There is absolutely no harm taking up, right? Like, I tell a lot of people who even do engineering, it's fine if you take up a photography course online. There is absolutely nothing to lose, right? Take up a course online, do an internship. It may be completely unrelated to what you're studying as well. Worst case,
Absolutely.
you will have more experience, right? Best case, you'll discover something that you didn't know previously, and make sure that whatever you're experimenting with, whatever you're trying, you're giving your 200%. So even if you don't end up doing that futuristically, right, there is some learning, there is some value, there is some insight that you've taken from that, which you could probably use later on. And interestingly enough, a lot of things I've learned, even when I was learning tattooing, even when I was doing law, even when I was doing journalism, a lot of things that I've learned at these various things actually help me with different facets today. And I think when you start your own company and you realize that you are your own marketing person, you're
Absolutely.
your own sales person,
Absolutely.
you are your own customer care person, you are your own HR, right? You have to basically be multi-skilled from day one. And I think
Absolutely.
these varied experiences just give you a broader perspective on how to deal with challenges.
Absolutely. And I think cognitive diversity in itself is not maybe celebrated as much as it should be, right? A specific skill set is celebrated. You're, appreciated for becoming a master's in something and doing a PhD in something. But if you've done a bunch of a lot of things, that's not really celebrated, at least in our country today. Hopefully, that will start changing
I
because
do hope so, definitely.
Generalization over specialization,
absolutely,
as
Yeah.
David
And
Epstein
I think it goes even to something as basic as having more flexibility in choosing your subjects and your courses, right? If you're
right,
an engineer, for example, if you're a mechanical engineer, you will have almost no flexibility. And what if you're a mechanical engineer who also likes music, right? Or who also likes photography? There is almost
correct,
no scope for you to have elective subjects. So I think at least at that point, if you can take up additional courses or internships to keep your hobbies and your passions going while you are graduating, I think it just again adds to the, like you mentioned, your cognitive diversification, just opens up a lot more horizons for you, and it probably gives you a lot more perspective on things that you may want to pursue in future as well.
absolutely makes sense.
Now, I think we should move on to Salt Store a bit more in detail, and we'd love for you to speak a little more about the vision for the brand, given the brand in a consumer-facing company plays such a big role, and Salt Store has done a great job making a brand out of themselves. So it'll be lovely if you could speak more on the vision of the brand and what are your thoughts about that.
Awesome. So I think to reach, or I think to talk about the vision, I think I'd want to give a little more context on why we started the Soul Store in the first place.
Hmm.
When we started back in 2013, all of us were fans. We've all grown up watching movies, TV shows, superheroes, comics, following comedians, musicians, sports teams, obviously. Even wrestling, right? I'm one of the very few people who I know who still watches wrestling day in and day out, even today. A lot of my friends probably stopped watching it after school or college. But all of us were fans, right, when we started the Soul Store, and our main vision was to make sure that you have great quality designs, great quality products and merchandise available for customers at a price that they can afford. Now, back in 2012, 2013, there wasn't the whole concept of official merchandise didn't really exist in the country. So
Right.
if you were a fan, you either had to spend say 2,500, 3,000 rupees buying that product from the US or from somewhere else. And ironically, that product was probably designed and manufactured in and around India. It was shipped to the US and then shipped back to you, which is why you are paying for the additional shipping.
Right.
Or the other option was, you spend 200, 250 rupees for a fake product where you're not sure of the quality, you're not sure of the genuineness, you don't know whether it lasts for 1 washes or 5 washes. So there was no one kind of filling that gap, and there was a massive gap that we saw, especially since we were fans. We wanted to do something more with this. So we actually got our first license back in about 2013, 2014, which is the Big Bang Theory. And our goal was to make sure that as a fan, you get a great product, a great design. And more importantly, you're not just buying a product or a t-shirt of a fandom that you like, but you're actually having an experience when you shop with the Soul Store. So one different thing that we did is we didn't just take the designs that they give us, put it on a t-shirt and sell it, which is what most people do. We actually put a lot of effort into recreating the designs, into tweaking the designs, because everyone at the Soul Store, right, from the design team to the marketing team to the production team, everyone is basically a fan of all of these properties. Everyone wants to add their little touch. So what we also did is we used to send this customized Sheldon roommate agreement, which fans of the Big Bang Theory will be familiar with. And we actually had so many people writing into us who are more excited about that roommate agreement than the product themselves. So we had people writing into us and saying, you know what, I love your collection, but I've always wanted a customized roommate agreement. It's something so cool. It's something I want to show off about. So I'm okay buying a product just to have this really, really cool roommate agreement, right? And I think that's something, that sort of philosophy, something we've always kept into every single license we've taken. It's why we've managed to work with more than 150 license partners over the 8 years successfully, right? There's a kind of legacy we built in licensing. Now, what is next for the Soul Store and what is our broader vision? I think while pop culture has definitely been at the core and the center of why we started off as an organization, and it continues to be an important part of our DNA today, I think the broader vision for the Soul Store is to be the number one brand in the casual wear space, in the more the lifestyle casual wear space, which goes beyond just pop culture. Now, I think if you see where we are at today, right, as far as Indian brands are concerned, most Indian brands in the casual wear space usually they go after the price play, right? We are the cheapest brand available, we have the biggest discounts. And I think, like to an extent in the online space, you will attract a certain amount of customers by offering more and more discounts. But I think it's important to realize that your discounts will only get you so far. A customer who is used to shopping on discounts or used to spending less on your website is never suddenly going to spend 100, 200, 300 rupees more if you choose to increase your prices. So essentially, it becomes a very, very slippery slope where you need to keep on burning money to acquire and retain the customers. And not enough people are focusing on actually creating a brand that offers value to the customer. I think that's where we managed to differentiate ourselves, where we are giving great quality. There is an assurance that when you buy a product from the Soul Store, the fit, the quality, the print, the durability, there is a certain sort of expectation that comes with that product, and at an affordable price point, right? So I think that's the sweet spot that we managed to hit with the Soul Store. And our goal definitely is to be the number one aspirational brand in the casual wear lifestyle space in the country. And I think I'm happy to say that over the last 7 or 8 years, we've managed to create that niche for ourselves. I think at this point, I want to talk about 2 Indian brands that have done a great job. One is Raymond, again in the formal wear space, and Manyavar in the ethnic wear space.
Right.
If you think of other Indian players, right, most Indian players have not been able to create a brand for themselves because, like I mentioned, they go up to the price play. And usually when you think of a brand or an aspirational brand that you want to wear, right, why do you want to wear a Nike t-shirt, a Nike pair of shoes? It's because it signals something great. It signals great quality. It's something cool. I want to be seen wearing that product. And I think very few Indian brands have managed to create that aspirational value for the customers. But I think Manyavar and Raymond have done a great job in their spheres. And our goal for Soul Store is to create something similar in the casual wear space.
That's awesome. And I think a lot of people don't realize what Soul Store has been able to achieve, because what happens when you do merchandising for other much larger brands is that you end up diluting your own brand a bit, right? It might sometimes happen that, okay, because Harry Potter is such a large brand, you'll go to a place and buy that. But that shift has happened, and I've been seeing that with Kant 2014 till 2021. हम लोग पहले ढूंढते थे कहाँ हैरी पॉटर मर्केंडाइज मिलेगा. Now we see Soul Store पे कौन से merchandise available.
Correct.
Awesome.
That switch has happened.
Yes. So I'm actually going to give you a fun anecdote, very, very related to what you mentioned, right? Definitely, we have seen that a lot of people transact on the Soulstore for the first time, because you're a Harry Potter fan and you saw our website, or you're
Right.
a Mumbai Indians fan, you're a DC fan, you're a Marvel fan. Now, one interesting thing is when we launched our solid t-shirts, right? The only reason you buy us, most people, when you shop online for a solid t-shirt, will go after price because I can't really see what the quality is based on the
Right.
website. The one interesting thing we've realized is that more than 80% of our sales for our solid t-shirts and our plain products actually come from repeat customers. So what this tells us is that people who probably come for the first time and bought a Harry Potter or a Mumbai Indians or any other t-shirt, they've actually stayed back because they also love the service, they love the fit, they love the quality,
Absolutely.
and the fact that someone is willing to wear a plain t-shirt of yours, right? Which it means they support the brand, they support the product, and not the Harry Potter or the Mumbai Indians logo. And I think that's a shift that we've also seen personally at the Soulstore, where if I have to break up our sales as licensed sales, which is your official merchandise, and your TSS originals, that's what we refer to them in-house, we've actually seen that license number drop from about 70% a couple of years ago, or about 75% to about 55-60%. So now about 40% of our sales come from our original TSS designs. And we see that number actually flipping to about 30-70 in the next 2 to 3 years. So we've seen a lot of our repeat purchasers actually coming for the planes, because a lot of our customers, right, who started off with us, including the three of us in 2013-14, are now slightly older. So, maybe you don't want to wear a very, very heavy graphic t-shirt or like a loud superhero t-shirt. And you actually seen our audience's taste maturing over the last 7-8 years, where a lot of them actually prefer wearing, like solid t-shirts, solid joggers, and more sort of semi-formal, not semi-formal products, but I think slightly more sober products. I think that's the point that I want to touch on even later, in this podcast, on how that is actually accelerated over the last year, because obviously so many things have changed for us.
Absolutely. And while you were saying, right, that we've grown old with the brand, I don't think how many of the apparel brands are thinking that way. For them, it's selling one piece to one person, but not being a part of that person's entire life journey. In the way that you're saying it now, I can feel it. Okay, these guys want to be with me for the next 10 years also, in terms of satisfying.
Definitely.
As the crowd is maturing, or as your user base is maturing, how do you cater to their demand as well? And 80% repeat rate, guys, it's crazy.
Amazing.
It's absolutely crazy. He's saying it that lightly, but it's crazy.
Our overall repeat rates are more than 110%, which means if 100 people order this May, if I spend 0 rupees on marketing, 110 orders will again come back in the next 12 months without me doing anything. So yeah. And I think again, the most important thing is just focusing on service and product, right? Especially in the online space, where you're flooded with ads of new brands every single day. There are so many distractions. There are so many options available every single day. It's a lot of hard work, but I think you have to put in that hard work every single day. And I think if you're able to hit that consistency, where I know if I order a product from the Soulstore, I know exactly what I'm getting. It's a lot of hard work, but it pays in the long run. So I think my only sort of advice here is focus on the value that you're providing a customer, and that value should not be being the cheapest product available. I think that value should be on the service and the quality that you're providing. And if you're able to do that, you will create a much longer relationship with your customer that goes beyond that first discount or that first sale that you offer them.
Absolutely. And one more thing that I noted when you were talking about your own merchandise going towards 70%, right? And the licensed merchandise being 30%. Basically, the licensed merchandise would be a customer acquisition strategy kind of a thing, right? Where you wow a certain base and they come onto the platform, and then your normal products would be maybe a higher margin product too, purely from a commercial lens.
Yeah, so from 100%, right, from a commercial point of view, you're not paying a royalty on those products, obviously.
Right.
So for us, for anyone disappointed that we're going to focus less on licensed merchandise, don't worry, that's not going to happen. We're going to make sure all your favorite TV shows, your movies, your sports teams are always going to be on the Soulstore. But like you mentioned, right, definitely it is for us, in fact, one of the reasons we've been able to be successful over the last 7 or 8 years is we were bootstrapped for the first 5 years. We actually raised our first round of funding about 5.5 years after we started the company. So for the first 5.5 years, we were entirely bootstrapped, and we took an initial investment of about 5 lakhs, which is what we had put in from our previous jobs as savings. And we actually grew that to a 35-40 crore run rate company in 5.5 years without burning any money, without any additional funding. Now, because we did not have the luxury or the privilege of burning money to acquire customers, we had to make sure that from day one the numbers made sense, your unit economics were strong. And one thing that helped us actually maintain our marketing at an affordable, profitable level was the fact that we were able to leverage these fandoms and get people onto our website at a much lower cost of acquisition. So the one thing that we keep discussing internally, right, is our job became easier because our job was not to create a demand, it was to fulfill a demand, right? I think J.K. Rowling has done a great job over the last 15, 20, 25 years to make you a Harry Potter fan. I have to simply tell you, hey, Shantanu, this is available at the Soul Store. So when that demand generation has already happened over many years through fandoms, I think it makes our messaging, our acquisition a lot easier because all we have to tell you is that it's available at the Soul Store. And that's definitely been one of the key factors in us maintaining our CACs at about 150, 170 rupees, which is around a third or a fourth of what your online CAC is for average players in the fashion industry. And I think it's been one of the reasons we've been able to be profitable even in the last 12 months, which has obviously been a very, very tough time for most brands.
We'd love to know more about how the last year has been given the pandemic. It'll be really interesting to know how you navigated those waters.
Yeah, because you've mentioned a couple of times that you've managed to stay profitable during that time.
Exactly.
Okay, so I mean, it's an interesting time to jog back to about 12 months ago, right? I think when the lockdown first hit, I think the biggest sort of challenge for us was twofold. One is that obviously in the last 7 or 8 years of a business, you had ups and downs, you had good months, you had bad months, but it's usually cyclical, right?
Correct.
So for things to completely go from 100 to 0 suddenly, I think is a very, very scary thought. It's very unfamiliar territory. It's not the same as having a bad day of sales or a bad month of sales. So I think that was the first challenge that we had to face. The second major challenge for us was uncertainty. So at that point in time, the lockdown kept getting extended. There was a lot of confusion on whether us, as an e-commerce brand that's selling non-essential items, are you allowed to ship? Are you not allowed to ship? When are you going to start shipping? Right? We had absolutely no clarity. So that was obviously a very, very unfamiliar, very, very scary time for us as a Soul Store. Now, this is where a couple of things really helped us. I think the important thing was kind of cult customer base that we had built over the last 7 or 8 years. So we were very, very transparent with all our customers. We told them that we are basically taking all precautions at our end from a sanitization point of view. We were also very, very honest and upfront in telling them that, right now there is no clarity on the government guidelines. Right. We don't know when we can start resuming shipping orders again, but right now we can take orders. So in fact, just 1 week before the lockdown is when we launched our app. Some may say great timing, some may say horrible timing, but we had basically been working on an app for a while. And fortunately or unfortunately, we launched the app just 1 week before the lockdown. In the last 12 months since we launched the app, we've crossed more than, I think, 1.5 million downloads. And today, almost 70% of our orders come from our app, right? Again, going back to our cult customer base. So at that point in time, again, because we were able to manage just on repeats, we were able to essentially switch off marketing completely. So that was something where as a brand, we had the flexibility of shutting marketing completely without affecting our sales. So purely from our repeat customers, we were able to sustain those difficult months of March, April, and May. We started shipping out those products in May and June, and then slowly things started picking up. The second thing I think that really helped us, or two other things. One is obviously we've seen habits changing significantly over the last 6 to 12 months, right? My personal favorite example is how my mom actually started shopping on Big Basket. It's something she would have never imagined she would do, right? If someone told her that you're going to sit on your phone and order groceries, she'd have probably thought you're joking. Now, I think we've seen a massive shift in customer behavior where a lot of people who had, trust issue shopping online, they prefer shopping offline with a known seller. You touch and feel the products, you have that one-on-one personal relationship. A lot of them are now a lot more comfortable shopping online, whether it's for essentials, it's apparel, it's any other product. I think that entire customer behavior has shifted. And I personally see this as a permanent shift. I don't see this completely going back even after things open up, because people have realized it's so much easier, it's so much more convenient. People are a lot more comfortable now also paying online because, again, COD is something that people now have issues with because of hygiene and safety. We've also seen our COD numbers, in fact, drop from about 60-65% of sales to about 35% of our orders now.
Awesome.
We're seeing a massive shift in people shopping online, massive shift in people transacting online as well. And I think with people working from home, right, all three of us are actually pretty casually dressed right now. maybe a year or 2 years ago. Obviously, the startup space is different, but I think for most people, you would not expect that you'd be sitting on a Thursday morning wearing a t-shirt for a podcast, right? So I think being in the online space and being in the casual wear space has definitely actually helped us a lot. There's a lot more demand for these products right now with people working from home. You can wear your t-shirts when you're working out, when you're doing your interviews, or just chilling at home on a weekend watching
Absolutely.
TV. I think comfort wear and casual wear is definitely something that's going to form a much larger part of your wardrobe going forward. And I think the third, and according to me, the most important thing, it may sound a bit cliched, was the team, right? It was not easy for anyone to go, especially at a creative, collaborative environment like ours, where your BD teams, your marketing teams, your design team, your customer care team are always sitting in office together, discussing, interacting. For us to break that kind of environment, everyone goes to their individual homes was not easy initially. But I think the kind of effort that they've put, right, when everyone has had personal challenges, everyone has had personal problems, for them to actually put their 200% and make sure that the company does not suffer, the work does not suffer, right, has actually helped us reach where we are today. And I think that's because our team believes in the company, they believe in the longer term vision of the Soul Store. It's something that they are proud to be a part of. And I think the fact that we have a 200% team, that's what I call them internally, has actually helped us not only, I think we're probably the only apparel brand or the only fashion apparel brand that's actually grown in the last 12 months and grown profitably without raising any additional capital. And I think these are the three main reasons we've been able to do that. It's extremely strong, focus on unit economics to make sure that you can keep the ship going even if your marketing essentially goes out to zero. Having that cult-like loyal customer base and having a great team that will support you even in your tough times.
Absolutely. And the last time also when we were talking, you talked about some of the values that are there at the Soul Store, right? So I would love to know about all of those values that exist there, and a little bit about the story, because there's always a story behind any value that you bring in as an organizational value.
Sure. So I think a couple of values that we have, a core philosophy that we have about 20 like fun points, or like to do, so like this is what a Soul Store should be like,
Right.
and we put that in our warehouses, in our offices, in our stores, every single in the manufacturing units everywhere, right? Two of my personal favorite ones, I think my first personal favorite is 99% right is 100% wrong. That's my personal favorite. And I think especially as an entrepreneur or as a founder, right, that every single thing, I think the one thing that entrepreneurs have in common is this kida, where if something is not perfect, you're going to keep working at it, right? Like it almost irritates you, something is not there. And if you need to fix it personally, you will do it because it's almost like an OCD
Yes.
where everything has to be perfect, right? And I think it's very important that every single person in the company shares that vision, that unless you are 200% sure of every piece of work that you submitted, right, whether it's small or it's big, it's less important, more important,
Right.
everything has to be at 200%, because till you are not 200% satisfied with your work, you should not basically give it in, right? And 99% right is not acceptable. I think that's one of the core philosophies at the Soul Store. Every person is a mini entrepreneur in themselves. Every person is a founder by themselves. And every person takes that ownership that this is not a company that I'm working for. This is my company, right? And I think when you have that sort of feeling towards any organization that you're a part of is when you will give your 200%. And I think the second most important one is that everything is figure outable. So especially at startups, right, when you have so many different things are changing every day. There are new opportunities for you to take on. You're also going to have new challenges. And one piece of not bad news, but I think a reality check for all budding founders is you're going to have more bad days than good. You're going to have more difficult days than easy days. You're going to have days where everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and probably things that you were not accounted for will also
Absolutely.
go wrong, right? I think what is most important at that point is your mindset, telling yourself that, okay, you know what? Yes, there are going to be new challenges every day. There are going to be things that you've not accounted for, that you could not have foreseen. But it's important to tell yourself that no matter what, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to give it my 200%, and I'm going to figure a way out of this problem. Because when you are stuck with a problem, right, you can either put your hands up and say, this is not my fault. This should not have happened. He should not have done this. She should not have done this. Or you can take that ownership and say, you know what? A problem exists. We need to figure this out and move on. How do we do that? And I think having a solution and oriented approach is very, very important. That's the only way you're going to move forward, because your challenges do not stop, right? Your challenges on day one will be different from your challenges at the end of year one, which will be different at the end
Right.
of year eight. So your problems don't disappear. That's something I keep telling people, right? That let people talk about the initial days of struggle as a startup founder. Honestly, every day is a struggle. Your problems don't disappear; they only change. So it's not a question of my first 1 or 2 years will be difficult. I'll work really hard. I'll set up my organization, and then year three onwards, everything is smooth sailing. Nothing is smooth sailing, right? So I
Correct.
think prepare yourself for a very, very long, hard journey, but also prepare yourself for a very, very satisfying journey if you're able to implement these 2 or 3 things and pull through.
Golden words to live by, I think. Absolutely.
Amazing, amazing, very
And
inspirational.
Thank you.
yeah, and I can
Um,
relate to it so much
Yeah.
because every day genuinely is a new challenge. Every day is a different challenge. And especially in an environment where where I so from Redon's perspective, we have never met the entire team at one place.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's right. So it's the child of the pandemic, and it's completely digital. And to make sure that the team is passionate about what they are doing, they align to the values that we have, it gets so much more difficult. And
Definitely.
making sure that it's sustainable as well. So what happens is for 2 to 3 months, 6 months, okay, everybody is passionate, but to sustain that passion, to keep that fire burning, I think the founders themselves have to burn a bit.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%, 100%. That motivation, that excitement, that like I'm actually genuinely curious and happy to try something new today, to do something new today. I think
Yes.
that has to flow from the top. And I think when
mm,
people, it's also a culture thing that when you see everyone around you giving the 200%, everyone around you
Yes.
looking forward to every day and working, being excited, right? It's infectious, and I think it
yes.
just spreads where everyone now wants to be a part of that high growth, that high excitement environment that your
Correct.
organization is.
Absolutely. I was just curious, do you guys also take interns because you have had such amazing experiences with internships?
Yes, we do. I mean, we're always looking to get interns on board. I think it's always fun to get a new perspective.
Right.
Also because our brand caters to the youth. It's
Mm,
always a very interesting experience for us to work with interns because it gives us a very different perspective on what younger people are also following, what they like. I know I sound really old when I say this, but I think it's important to not like kind of lose track with your customer base. And yeah, even in fact, even people at the source, I think the average age of people at the source is probably early or mid 20s. So it's always fun and exciting to get interns on board. They have that new energy, they have that
mm,
spark, they want to learn stuff, they're always willing to try out 20 different things. And I think most importantly, the perspective that they come with is a very, very different, but a very relevant perspective, especially to a brand like the Soul Store. But yes, it's always fun having interns. So if anyone wants to apply to the Soul Store, feel free to get in touch with
And
me.
you'll get a lot of applications, I think. Your
The
HR
thing
will
is that
be
anyway happens. Yeah, that anyway happens. So why not? Might as well get more excited people who want to be a part of the journey.
absolutely. And one more thing that I am super curious about is that after the pandemic, we've seen that a lot of tier two, tier three cities have also
mm.
started coming online and ordering online. So
Yes.
have you also seen that shift happening at the Soul Store? Has that percentage from top tier cities to a bit lower tier cities changed?
It changed drastically. In fact, now more than half our orders, I think about 55% of our orders come from tier two and tier three cities. I
Wow.
think one great sort of leveler obviously has been the internet. If you take the example of Marvel, right, which is one of the most successful franchises in the world. Now, see, back in 2007, 2008, I think when the first Iron Man movie launched, it was still a fairly urban concept. It was still a fairly niche
Right.
concept. I saw some numbers recently, but I think the last Avengers movie that came out in 2019 did about 400 crores
Yes.
in ticket sales in India, right?
In India.
That's 100 crores for a Bollywood movie with a top Bollywood actor is considered something phenomenal. So for a Western movie with a Western concept, right? It's not like a large part of India has grown up reading Marvel comics. I think it's been a fairly urban phenomenon for the longest time. But the fact that this is now available, right? It's available in multiple languages. You can literally just go on YouTube or go on your phone
Right.
and watch the entire movie. I think it's become so much more accessible. So whether it's your movies, it's your TV shows, a lot of these Western licenses that we had, or licenses that we thought were more urban focused, I think has cut across tier two and tier three as well. And I think a lot more tier two, tier three people now want to basically buy aspirational brands that they want to signal that they are part of a
Right.
certain following. I want to be a cool Marvel fan. I want to support my favorite comedian. I want to be seen as a fan of my favorite IPL team. And I think we've seen a massive shift, and we only see this growing because the kind of accessible, relevant population that is there in tier 2, tier 3 is massive. And I think even the licensors that we work with have realized that this is a largely untapped market right now. So there's a lot more focus, even from the licensors end, to actually tap into these people and
Absolutely.
create a larger fan base in your tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities in the country.
And from a pricing perspective, do you have a differentiated pricing strategy for these lower tier cities, or is it the same as top tier cities?
No, so we have a consistent pricing. I think we've experimented a lot with pricing, right? Like trying slightly low prices, trying slightly higher prices. And what we've essentially arrived at, we hope and we believe, is like a sweet spot where you're definitely getting value for money. You're getting a great quality product. It's something where and one thing we're very proud of is we don't claim to be the cheapest brand out there. It's not our focus, right? We don't want to make sure that your product is the cheapest product that's going to probably start fading or shrinking in your first couple of washes, in the first couple of months. We guarantee that when you buy a product from the store, so you will get a great product, you will get a product that you will love, you will be proud to wear it, and it's going to last you for many, many years. In fact, there are certain products, since Karan mentioned that he first bought our product in 2014, there are certain really, really old t-shirts from 2013, 2014 that I still wear today at home, right? Now, obviously, our quality has significantly increased over the last 7 or 8 years. So the standard of t-shirts that was in 2013 or 14 is probably not the base that I want to go with. But there are still some of those t-shirts that I wear even today. So I think the important thing for us is the proposition that we offer is a value proposition where you will get a great product at an affordable price point. It's not something that, we don't want to charge a very, very high amount that alienates a large part of our country. We don't see ourselves as a luxury brand. We see ourselves as a mid-premium brand that's aspirational, it's affordable, and it's great quality, it's great value for money. That's the sweet spot that we are at.
Casual and comfort. Absolutely.
100%.
I had one question. I'm curious to know how the trends with Indian pop culture or Indian brands. We speak a lot about these Western brands, Harry Potter, Marvel, but are you seeing any trend in fandom increasing for Indian properties?
Okay, so very, very interesting question. I think I'll probably break up Indian fandoms, if I had to, very broadly as, say, entertainment and sports, if I had to bucket it in these two categories. Now, sports is definitely, I think, picked up at a much faster pace, and the major reason for that is cricket and the IPL. While the IPL started, I think, about 13 or 14 years ago, it's really in the last 3, 4, 5 years that we've actually seen a tremendous growth in IPL merchandise or IPL as a licensing property. So we first signed our IPL teams back in 2017. And if I see the growth from 2017 to 2020, which is when the last complete season got over, I think we've probably seen, purely from the Soul Source point of view, I think about a 90 to 100x growth from 2017 to 2020. So we had 2 teams in 2017, we had 4 teams in 2020. By doubling the teams, we've seen almost 100x growth, right? I think what we're now seeing is a lot of these teams are now understanding that merchandise is not just like an extra thing, that there's not just an alternative of revenue.
Correct.
We've seen teams focusing a lot more in terms of the kind of partners they choose, in terms of their involvement as far as finalizing the designs and the products are concerned, and most importantly, in actually marketing these products to their fan base. So they're now realizing that this is literally a gold mine that they are sitting on. It's essentially a massive opportunity that they have not tapped into for the first 8, 10, 12 years of their existence. And we've also seen a lot more teams now seriously getting into merchandise, a lot more players now coming into the IPL merchandise market. So as far as sports is concerned, I think, again, cricket has been at the forefront of it. As far as other sports are concerned, I think, again, it's an issue of consistency. A lot of leagues and a lot of teams that we see have only propped up in the last 5, 10, 12, 15 years. When you compare that with sports teams abroad, right, like your cricket teams, your football clubs, for example, which have tremendous fan following, these are clubs that have been around for 100 plus years, right? You've had people supporting them, then their children. It's almost like a family legacy that's been passed on. So I think it's unfair to compare sports teams and franchises in India. But I think it's important for us to basically build that sort of cult following, so that 10, 15, 20 years down the line, you'll probably have people who have 1 or 2 generations of Mumbai Indians and Chennai Super King fans above them. And it's just, translated even to the lower generations. The second part of it, I think, again, is entertainment, where, to be honest, I think it's the same issue. We've not invested that kind of time, money, and effort into building a franchise. Now, if you see Marvel, they've invested billions and billions of dollars in the last 12, 13, 15 years in their movies. But it started a long time before that, right? They've had their Marvel comics probably for, I don't know, 70, 80, maybe even 100 years.
Absolutely.
So it's taken 100 years of their effort to be a global phenomenon today in India. And the fact that we are talking about it today is the result of the effort that they've put in over the years. So I think if I talk about entertainment from, say, like a web series or a movie franchise point of view, I think it's very, very important for us to, or for the licensors or the property creators to invest a lot more in these characters so that fans actually relate to them, fans actually buy into their story, and fans want to own a piece of that memorabilia or merchandise. And I think that's going to take a lot more effort. It cannot be a flash in the pan. I'm launching a movie today. I launch merchandise. Is there for 6 months, then it goes away, out of sight, out of mind. It has to be a much longer, a much more consistent effort to try being comparable to the numbers. But I think the kind of numbers we've seen globally are very, very encouraging. So it's an opportunity waiting to be tapped. And I think at a smaller scale, when you talk about content creators like your musicians, your comedians, I think these guys have done a great job of building their brand and building their fan base over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years when we've seen this YouTube sort of massive spurt of growth. And I think it's a great time for all of these people to now start thinking of merchandise as a very serious extension of their brand as well. Not only from a sales point of view, but also from a marketing point of view.
Absolutely.
If you are a comedian that has built that kind of that niche following for yourself over the last couple of years, you have a strong subscriber base. Then please get in touch with me, and we'd be happy to launch your merchandise at the moment.
That's a pitch for you guys.
Definitely.
Yeah, another interesting question I had was your thoughts on NFTs. You've seen these collectibles being sold by the NBA, baseball cards, stuff like that. That is also a function of fandom for those properties, and that space like booming really crazily, or it might even be just a rush which is temporary. But is it a space that you guys are looking at?
To be honest, not right now. Again, I think you summed it up perfectly, right? It's a new phenomenon. Not really sure if it's going to be a bubble and bust sort of phenomenon or something that's going to catch on. I think also as a concept, it is fairly new, where even a lot of customers are not entirely sure on what the concept is. So probably as of now, no. But I think, if there is an opportunity, we're happy to leverage that as well. If it fits into our overall scheme of being that number one casual wear lifestyle brand in the country, if it fits into that overall scheme of things, I think as an organization, we are always very agile. Every single thing that can be A/B tested as a Soul Store is A/B tested. Everything is feedback driven. Everything is data driven. So if there is an opportunity, it may not make sense today, but if it makes sense tomorrow, we will 100% pursue it. And I think being open to trying various things is actually what has gotten us to where we are today. Because when we first started off, if you told us that we would be where we are today, I would have had absolutely no idea. And I think it's that willingness to take a risk and just experiment with different things and then see what works. That's been a large part of our success to date.
Absolutely. And experimenting your way out of a problem is the main crux of it. We also keep saying this in my business consulting, fund management consulting stints. We used to say, you identify a problem, you identify the root cause of the problem, and then you find a solution to the problem. After I came into the startup space, I realized you find the root cause to the problem, you experiment 15 different solutions, and then you pick the one that works the best. So I think that's 100%. Really important.
Yeah, and I think even the solution keeps changing, right? With scale, the same problem will have a different solution. So yeah, I think the only way a startup can succeed is knowing that your startup is always work in progress. You're never a finished product, and I think as long as you have that mindset, you're good to go.
And when you said that Soul Store looks into data very, very deeply, any interesting counterintuitive data insights that you found?
I mean, do you look at data like Calcutta में शायद बैटमैन के sales बहुत ज़्यादा हो रहे हैं, तो हम वहाँ पे वैसा कुछ चलाते हैं. I'm just curious to know because very interesting data points you guys must have.
Correct.
Definitely. So I think broadly when we talk about data and feedback driving everything that we do, right? I'll give you one sort of simple example. Whenever we launch any new category or any new fit or any new cut, right? We obviously do a lot of research in the background, making sure that this is what customers would want. But obviously, whenever you launch a new category, a new product, a new design, for example, what we do is after we've say sold a couple of pieces for the first couple of weeks, we make sure that for every single new product, design, category, etc. that we launch, we do at least about 200 to 300 product feedback review calls, right? Now, every single product is given a rating. We test every product based on what the fit was, based on what the design feedback was, what is the overall quality feedback, what is the value for money feedback for both our exclusive members and our non-exclusive members. There are about 5 or 6 criteria on which we rate every single product out of 5. We then come up with an overall rating out of 5. And if any product falls below 4.5, we then go back to the drawing board, right? If people are not happy with the design, what do we need to tweak? If people are not happy with the fit, what do we need to change? If people are not happy with the quality, how do we basically go back and make sure that this is changed? And our current rating on our, for the, I think you must have done probably more than a couple of hundred different products call outs. So probably 15, 20, 30,000 product call outs totally. Our average rating for products is about 4.7 right now. And that's something we keep working on. So like I mentioned, that feedback could be to the operations team, could be to the production team, to the design team, to the marketing team. It could even be to the strat team on what the ideal price point for this should be. But that's the kind of level of feedback that we have. Even as far as, like our various departments are concerned, I think one of the biggest challenges that traditional players in the apparel and the fashion space faced, right? One advantage obviously that we had is when we started the Soulstone about 2013, it was at that initial sort of cusp, where a lot more people were getting on smartphones, data was becoming a lot more accessible. That's something, the benefit of the internet is what a lot of older traditional players didn't have, right? Were essentially entirely offline. Now what happens is it's a very non-agile system. If you're planning what winter collection to launch at the end of this year, you're probably deciding that 9 months in advance, right? So 9 months in advance, you're basically getting certain designs, you're showing them to distributors, you're estimating what the quantity should be. You then have a 3 to 4 month production cycle. It hits the offline stores by September, October. By the time you actually get feedback on what is selling, what is not selling, it's too late for you to change anything, right? Correct. So these are the sleeping giants essentially, and that's how it works now. What we do at the Soulstore is our manufacturing is 50% in-house and 50% outsourced. What this helps us with is we have, based on certain trends, we can predict what a product should sell, right? So we know what our order quantity should be. Now, what we do is we assume a safe quantity that we can anyway give to our outsourced manufacturers who would have a much longer lead time. The advantage of us having in-house manufacturing is lead times, which should normally be 30 to 45, even 60 days outside, get cut down to between 5 to 15 days at the Soulstore. So tomorrow, if I launch a product and it's selling a lot faster or a lot better than I expected, I can actually tweak my order of prioritization for my in-house manufacturing and make sure that a product where the opportunity loss would be more because of stockouts is prioritized. So we've actually developed our in-house apps for supply chain and for production to make sure that there is real-time feedback given to the person who's cutting or stitching that t-shirt, saying that, right now, based on the order of priority and the potential loss if this t-shirt goes out of stock, this is the new order that we need to follow. And the fact that we've been able to develop this means we're able to work with very, very lean inventories. You're never overstocked on inventory. You also make sure that you're able to move a lot faster and minimize your stockouts. Now, these are things that we do with every single department to make sure that we are data driven. It helps to be extremely capital efficient. And that's why we've been able to grow where we have with only one round of funding in the last 8 years. So we've basically, I think we're probably the only D2C brand that's reached 100 crores of revenue with only 10 crores of investment. Most others have taken between 20, 30, 50, 60 crores. Some brands have raised even more than 100 crores to do 100 crores in revenue. We've done that with just 10 crores because we've had an extremely capital efficient system.
Such an interesting learning there, that in the 1 to 1000 stage, technology becomes such a important differentiator between companies.
100%, yeah, 100%. I think tech is literally going to be the engine that's going to fuel all growth, because when you want to grow from X to 1.1x or 1.2x, you can basically do it with more capital and with more people. But I think when you want to grow from 1x to 5x and 10x, I think technology has to be I think more than technology, I think data has to be at the center of every decision that you take, which decides whether or not something is going to be scalable.
Absolutely. And I think all of the tech first companies also that are coming in are seeing data as an asset, right? Data is an asset for a company, and you can use it, tweak it in whichever way you want to drive certain outcomes out of it. It can be better capital allocation. It can be better customer satisfaction. It can be a lot of different things that you can do with that data.
Definitely.
Absolutely. data is the new oil.
Yeah. So I think because Karan mentioned that, like, how minutely do you go into data? I think it's very, very important to understand how exactly data works in every single facet of how we function as an organization. Now, when it comes to products, right, what kind of sizes work better? What is the ideal size ratio? So if I'm ordering 500 t-shirts, how many small should I order? How many medium should I order? Right? That's a fairly basic explanation. Now, what kind of mock-up works on the website, right? Maybe for t-shirt A, a model image works better. For t-shirt B, a different, like, just a hanger mock-up works better. That's, like,
Right.
so what converts better? What banner works better on the website? What is the sort order of t-shirt that I should show to for maximum conversion? Even something as minute as from what cities or what pin codes am I getting maximum COD returns? Should I probably disable COD for certain pin codes? Which courier partner has a high success rate in delivering to each and every pin code? Which
Right.
courier partner charges me how much for which zone? So I think there are infinite possibilities on what you can do and what you can optimize with data. And I think it's very, very important to have a team that is data literate, or to have people rather that are data literate across every single team to leverage these. So even as a part of our offline journey, right, I just want to touch upon that. We launched our first offline store in 2019, about 6 years after we established ourselves online.
Where where is that?
Um, yeah, so we have three stores in Bombay. We opened our first one in Bandra in 2019, and the second and third one in Thane and Colaba. In fact, our fourth and fifth stores are going to open up in the next 2 to 3 months themselves, and we're going to open another 35 to 40 stores in 3 to 4 years. Now, again, where do you open your store?
Mm.
What kind of products to stock at your stores, right? Because on your website you can sell all your products, but you have a limited space at your offline
Right.
stores. So
Correct.
what categories move, what sizes move, what's the split between men to women? How have those cities performed from an online point of view versus what we should stack up offline? We're planning to build our omni-channel platform. So if you're sitting in Delhi tomorrow, and we have a product that's available at a Delhi store, you can actually just get that delivered in the next couple of hours itself, right? So a lot of these tweaks, a lot of
Awesome.
these growth levers that we are planning to do have data at the core of it. And I think it's very, very important, especially for an online business, to have data at its core of every single decision that's made.
And how are you expanding the? How are you enabling these stores, physical stores? Are you giving out franchises, or is it your own stores that you are opening right now?
Yeah. So all our stores right now are company owned themselves. We're not looking to get into franchising immediately. And the reason for that is, and it's also the reason why we started the TSS offline stores. As a brand that was an online first brand, it was important for us to go offline to add the tangibility and the credibility to an online brand. So for us, essentially, it was an entirely branding point of view to add credibility to a customer. And it was almost like a permanent billboard for us, right? Instead of paying for a billboard for a couple of months, I think the
Right.
best billboard you can have is an offline store. Now,
Absolutely.
what we were very, very pleasantly surprised with was the kind of response we got to our first store, where we were operationally profitable in the first month itself. We actually recovered our entire setting up capex, I think, within
Wow.
about 4 to 5 months. We were
Wow.
personally, our reason behind going offline was, if we can have a great billboard, if we can add that credibility, and we can make sure that we don't lose or burn money keeping an offline store running, for us it's a success, right? That was the kind of expectation that we had when we first went offline, and we've actually seen all our stores being profitable, including during your pandemic months. So for us, it's very, very important to make sure that our offline stores maintain that level of branding, and then maintain the level of customer service that we offer at our stores. So probably only once we are certain of a franchise partner actually being able to deliver on those points will we consider, like, looking elsewhere. But for now, we're happy with the source store actually taking on the mantle of our offline store.
Superb.
Great, Harsh. It has been a really, really interesting conversation. I think ton of
Awesome.
learnings. We'll just probably end this podcast just by getting to know your favorite fantasy slash superhero movies. Given what Soulstore does, we thought that'll be an interesting thing to know.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm actually surprisingly not much of a superhero fan. I don't watch too many movies, but I love TV shows. I think specifically from the licenses and characters that we sell on the website, Mortal Kombat is my personal favorite. It's
Wow.
a video game that I've grown up playing and loving. So I'm personally very, very invested in Mortal Kombat. I love watching wrestling also, like I mentioned, and I'm a massive, massive cricket fan. So, whether our IPL teams are playing or not playing, or there is some random test match happening in some corner of the world, I'm always watching it. So, yeah, I think TV shows, cricket, and WWE are probably my three personal favorites from the Soul Source portfolio.
Awesome.
Great. I love
Thanks.
Mortal Kombat. Who is your favorite character?
It's tough. I obviously loved Sub-Zero and Scorpion growing up as a kid, but then later, I think when you grow older, I actually preferred Shang Tsung because he can essentially morph into any other character, which you probably don't realize the value of that when you're a kid, but it just seems so much cooler when you grow up, right? Because when you're a kid, Sub-Zero's costume just looks sexy, so you follow Sub-Zero. Yeah, but I absolutely love Mortal Kombat, and I'm waiting for the latest movie to come back in theaters or online.
Thanks for doing this, Harsh. We'll be waiting we'll be waiting for the Soul Store to launch some more crazy merchandise, as well as all the best for your own merchandises that you'll be launching. Your case should be studied at IIMs, at IITs as a case study on how do you build a brand, an apparel brand in the country. Kudos to you on the amazing job that your team has done.
Thank you so much, Shantanu. It was great chatting with you guys as well. Lots of fun things we discussed, and we'll call you for our Bangalore store opening definitely.
Absolutely, I'll be there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys.